We were going to talk about Isn't It a Pity? Did anybody try playing it? Did everybody give that a shot? Right. Yeah. Show us what you know about it. Show us how you attack it.
Capo. I pretty much watched that video.
Mm-hmm.
Capo.
You're Capo in 5. Okay. Good. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's a pretty good voicing. I was listening to it before. Let me play a little of it, and then we can talk about what you hear in it, because unpacking this is a little tricky.
I don't know the exact chords what I'm playing.
Well, really. That's part of the challenge of it. So listen to what you hear, and then we'll listen to like a verse of it, and then we'll talk about what's in here. And listen to figures that you're hearing that are sort of defining, and we'll talk about those. How we break each other's hearts, cause each other pain. How we take each other's love without thinking anymore. Forgetting to give back. Is there a pity? Something takes so long. Listen to the bass here. Listen to what he's doing. So you have this pedal doing that. So there's a lot going on there. You know, what you did, you know, the part where you've got a capo up on the top here, that works really well. And you can hear that note on the top. Let me get my other capo. You know, you've got so you're catching that part of it. And then sometimes it goes, or sometimes it goes. So, so there's that, but it's also, it's hard to do that with an open chord. You know, if you're playing this, you know. C7 to A7 to a C. So you got that going on, but you also have this bass going. So, and that's not moving, that's like a pedal, it's just laying there. So it's not really going to the A or to the C. So you're thinking, well, why is it so hard to figure that out? Why is it so hard to break that out? And here's why. Because if you look, it was produced by Phil Spector, who is known for his wall of sound. So if you look here on Wikipedia, so who played on that record? Well, you have Harrison playing several guitars. You have 2 pianos, an electric piano and a harmonium, which are all keyboard instruments. You have 3 acoustic guitars. That's Badfinger playing there. So you've got at least 5, possibly 6 guitar tracks. you've got bass and drums, you've got 4 pianos, and a lot of what's going on is the piano. So you can hear there's a boatload of things. It's like every spare bit of space is being filled out. So what you have to do with something like this is, if you want to try to play it as a solo or play it with friends, you can do 2 different things. One is to do what you were doing, Ryan, which is you have the thing capoed up and you play it off that that figure, and then somebody else might play the same thing down here. And you have that. So you have that drone on top. So you have that drone, you have that drone, you have the big strums. That's those 2 guitar parts. If you put those together, that's like 90% of it, which is pretty cool. The other thing you could do that I thought would be interesting, let me show it, let's start right on here. You've got that descending. That's the defining thing that you have to have in there somewhere. And you capture that. It's easier to play that up here on the neck than it is to play that down below. But I was thinking, and I'm gonna remember how I did this. This is how I did this. I was thinking, wouldn't it be cool if you could play it in drop D? Where if you're playing the D chord, what you're playing up there, you get that low note on the bottom to drone that. But of course, you can't do that if you're using a capo like this. So here's a trick. What I have here is a capo that, where's my camera? That I've sawed the end of it off. So it'll only go across 5 strings. So I can do that.
That's out of
I have that open. So when I play, so there I got the drone on the bottom. Which lushes it out a great deal. If you're playing it in G, of course, if you're going to sing it somewhere else, you got it down to D, you could do that. So that's a trick if you wanted to do that. What cued me to that was if I was going to play actually in D and I wanted to do a drop D tuning, what I could do is I could take the capo, a regular capo, just put it there so it doesn't quite touch the E string. And I've got automatic drop D, even though it's tuned in E. So the difference between that, have you played drop D before, Ryan? Are you familiar with it?
I am not much. I've fiddled a little bit.
Yeah, Grace, you have. There's some songs that sort of lend itself. A lot of metal stuff is in drop D, so you get that big tonnage down at the bottom. You see a lot of that kind of stuff. But what it does is little tricks like that, like playing drop D or playing an open tuning or using it like a half capo. What it does is it opens up the voicings so you have more range on the instrument. See, it's so you can cover more territory with it sonically, which I think works really well.
So is drop D pretty much you're just taking your low E string and making it a D and putting the D in the bass?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. A drop D would be if this is. Now, what's different? It's a really functional tuning, and you can use it in a lot of ways. A lot of like cinematic.
I was gonna ask, is drop D's like that's a big Neil Young tuning, right?
Yeah, it's a big Neil Young tuning.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff with drop D.
Okay.
The thing is, though, if you were doing that double capo thing, the interval between the A and the E string up above the capo is still the same. It's still, it's still a fourth. Now the interval is a fifth. So now I can do things because it's open. If I do a double capo, I can't do those kind of tricks. So if you're gonna do like Wake Up Little Susie, wake up little Susie, wake up. So what you would end up doing is playing those lower three strings for the chord and just not play the other ones because it's not going to be the same intervals. But using a trick like that really sort of opens up the sound of it if you're playing by yourself. But the other thing is, if you're playing with somebody, what either a drop tuning or a capo lets you do is it lets you play the same song in the same key, but with different voicings, and then it just flushes that whole thing out. It makes it sound much more lush sounding. So when I'm playing with people, unless I'm doing something like a bluegrass thing or something like that, where everybody has to be playing in the same key, what I'm listening for when I'm playing a lot, when I'm playing with other people a lot, let me put it that way, is I'm sort of listening for parts. You know, if somebody's playing these big sort of strumming kinds of things, what can I play that's going to add to the song and not be that? And it might be something like boom, you know, something like that, or playing it, you know, either play it in a different position, because then you're going to have different notes on the top and the bottom. If I play that up here, then I got that kind of thing happening, and this thing happening, exactly what we just did. Or you just get that sort of, it becomes more of an ensemble playing than like several people just bashing away at the same chord. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So if you listen to, you know, your dad keeps pushing us back to the Beatles, and I think that's good advice. If you listen to some Beatles songs, you can hear where George and John are almost never playing the same parts. They're always playing something that's sort of counterpoint to each other or complementary to each other, so that you get the feeling of more parts. And, you know, it's like I said last time, we were talking about playing some of those early Beatles songs with a bass player and a drummer. If you have the bass player and drummer and two voices, and the two guitar players are playing different parts, then you've got 6 instruments, 6 sounds happening all at once, and it's a very big sound with only 4 people. So it's a good way. It just makes the business of playing with people fun. Plus, you have a chance to go and listen to the record and hear, well, what parts are they playing in there? You know, and how do you play that little part? And that's, we had also talked about, well, how do you build your vocabulary? That's one of the ways you do that, is you find the little part that somebody's playing, like that John is playing in one of the songs, and then what George is playing separately. And then you learn both of them, and you can play both of them and learn how to build those things. So it helps your playing, it helps your ear training a lot, because you're listening to, well, what notes are there? You know, that you saw the video and it took you up to the capo there, so you'd say, oh, I see what he's doing. He's got the thing capoed up on the 5th fret, so I can get that D shape. So that makes sense. If you hadn't seen the video, how would you have gotten to that position? How would you know that that's what's going on? And the way you would do that is, if you listen to it again from the front, from the top, listen to, like, stop it. Oh, Jesus. Stop, go back to the beginning. What you're listening is for little defining figures that give you a clue about what chord shape it's using. And that third on the top, that's a really big clue. That's a clue that it's that shape. The question is where. So if you listen to the acoustic guitar here at the very beginning, you hear it? That's what you're listening for. You're listening for clues when you try to unpack these things. We know it's in G. You can figure that out pretty readily. But how's he getting that? And he could be playing this, that kind of a form, but then he can't get to that second note. So with a lot of these kinds of songs, with a lot of these kinds of things that we're talking about, how did that come about? I'm certain he was just noodling around. It fell under his hands. There's Joni Mitchell's like the queen of open tuning. She has like something like 70 different tunings that are all kind of like screwy. And you know, a lot of it she's just like noodling around. It's like, okay, what does that get me to? And it gets you out of your comfort zone, and then something comes out of that. But she said one time, people that are trying to play her stuff, she said, if it seems really difficult to play, then you're not playing it right, because I'm not that good. You know, she's really not, she's a great, you know, as a musician, she's great. As a guitar player, she's not, her picking style is relatively uncomplicated. The tunings are what really is the magic in that, because you're getting all these different voicings out of the tunings. But what she's doing is just sort of like this sort of, you know, this kind of picking kind of thing. It's really pretty simple, but the tunings are what does that. And if you can figure out what the tuning is, you're halfway there. So it's similar example. You know, so it's open G, which is what I do with open G is I tune the E string down a half step, so it's a D, and I tune the A string down so it's a G, and then I tune the E string down so it's a D. But what Keith does when he plays, he does open G, but he takes the lower E string off completely. So he's playing with a 5-string guitar rather than a 6-string guitar. So that's his tuning. So if you play something like Honky Tonk Woman, it sounds exactly right because it lays under your hands so easily. And you can, I mean, every guitar player that I know has tried to play Honky Tonk Woman without playing it in open tuning, and you can, but it doesn't sound quite right. So things like, you know, that kind of stuff, they sound that way because the tunings take you to that place. So they're fun. They're fun to do if you're playing with people. They're fun to do if you're playing by yourself. If you're playing a show by yourself and you got to retune every song, that becomes kind of a headache. Or that's why people have, you know, like a second guitar. Like when I'm playing with this guy I play with, he does one song in the evening in a big open tuning. So he just has a guitar sitting on the side with an open tuning so that you don't have to think about it. Because the other thing that happens, if you play a lot in open tuning, like if you play slide in open tuning, which a lot of people do, if you detune a bunch of those strings, they get kind of slack, you know, so you'd want to have maybe a set where that particular string that you would detune is a little heavier so that when you detune it, it still has the same amount of tension. You know what I mean? So is it a pity? So good choice. What other songs would be interesting to play? What other kind of things would be interesting? I was thinking about maybe talking about doing a session on picking. Courtney, you mentioned something about strumming style, strumming patterns. I was thinking about doing something on blues, just talking about the blues and blues patterns and soloing and that kind of thing, which might be sort of interesting. We could do a whole session just on electric guitar, which would be sort of interesting. Depends on how loud Grace can turn her amp up, I think. I'm going to venture. I'm going to venture not loud enough. That would be one. But you know, you don't. The good news is you don't have to turn up super loud to get really good sound anymore because they have all those modeling things. But what you want to talk about strumming for this, and then we can talk about maybe just talk about the blues stuff next time, or do you have a particular song you'd want to try to learn? Grace, you talk about Haim and some of those other bands.
Yeah, I guess like I don't think I'm good enough to really nail the intro, but a guitar part I've been thinking about a lot lately is Jeff Buckley's So Real. It's not written by Jeff Buckley, I forget the name of the musician.
Uh-huh.
But it's very dissonant in a very pleasing way. And I can't
Okay.
really
What's it called again?
So Real by Jeff Buckley. I'll put it in the chat.
See if you can find who's the and it's his version or somebody else's version.
It's
Or
his
it's
original
his-
song. The guitar part's written by another musician who is not him. I'll see if I can
Okay.
find.
But it's recorded with him. It's his
Mhm.
recording. Okay, let's hear it.
The intro guitar part is very interesting. It's My White Whale. Michael Tig.
Michael Tiggy, I've heard of him. So can you what should I play it? Show Jeff Buckley, Show Real. Let me see if we can play. Well, here's an acoustic version. That'd be interesting. Let's hear what the original one that he has is. Once this commercial is over. He must be really popular because you can't jump out of the ad. The keys to the heart is enterprising. Fine. Come on. Good, there we go. Let me sleep tonight on your couch. I remember the smell of the fabric of your simple city dress. Yeah.
Mhm. I'd say the intro is the most important part, like
Yeah.
in terms of the
But he's
melody.
as I'm listening to it, I'm wondering whether he's playing that in an open tuning.
Mhm. Yeah, I've watched like 3 different intros on it. They all do it differently.
Yeah, I'm sure that's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I'll figure that out and we can talk about that next week. That's a cool
I
song.
love that. It's yeah, really love that guitar part for some reason.
Yeah, it is sort of a little dissonant. And then he has that little sort of like that almost sort of soul kind of thing going on. And there's like 3 or 4 different fragments that are sort of meshed together that give it that sound. It's really kind of interesting. I like it. It's really cool. Okay, I'll figure that one out. The other one I was thinking of that would be fun to play would be that Who song "Won't Get Fooled Again." No, Behind Green Eyes. Behind Green Eyes. Do you know that one?
Blue Eyes.
Behind Blue Eyes. That's right, that one. Thank you, Bill. I don't care about lyrics. Lyrics are just spacers between guitar solos. That's all I care about. We can talk about that. I'll send you a tab on it or send you a chord chart. But what's cool about it, to Courtney's point, is that when Townsend's playing it, there's a lot of accents and push and pull in it when he's playing it. And until you really listen to the Who stuff, you don't realize that a great deal of the Who's sound is acoustic guitar under the big loud guitars, and acoustic guitar is what's driving a lot of that stuff. And Townsend still does, I guess, but he was noted as kind of like almost like a flamingo kind of thing, where where he's playing, the kind of that kind of thing, and he's doing that strum, but you can also hear him doing these sort of cross rhythm accents. He's doing that kind of stuff, a very, very fast thing. And that's driving that sound underneath all the big loud guitars, which is really kind of a great sound. I mean, a sort of a not a really, really ultra distorted sound. His sound was not really terribly distorted. It was just loud and big and ballsy. But that with an acoustic, which has more sort of a sparkly sort of texture to it, the two of those together really is a big, rich sound, which is pretty cool. So maybe I'll talk about that maybe for a little bit too.
Yeah,
Jen?
I'd be really interested in learning how to play that. I mean, just picking up a strumming pattern in a song. So like, because it's one thing to look at, you know, to figure out the chords and play it, but it never sounds right unless you're strumming it the right way.
Well, that's true. And mostly what you're hearing when people are doing that is the accents that they're putting into it. I mean, it's when you're playing rhythm guitar, you know, you're not just, it's not like a metronome where you're just banging away on it. What you're doing it.
Yeah.
You know, you're hitting accents either on the upstroke or the downstroke. And what I'm doing there, and I don't even think about this sometimes, you know, if I'm playing that, what I just played, you know. You know, where I'll actually palm mute for a beat to sort of give it some air so that when I hit that second chord coming in, it gives it more of an accent. So what, listen to the drums, you know, listen to what's percussively, what's the guitar player playing when he's strumming it, you know, where are the accents, where's he or she pushing it or leaving some space in there. So it's rarely the kind of thing where it's just straight, you know. You can hear that push when he hits that and hits those beats. Listen for where those beats are. And then what will happen is, and it's the kind of thing you and I have discussed before, Corey, is that you can't be playing really delicately. If you're playing really delicately, you have nowhere below that to go. Also, if you're playing like, you know, balls to the wall, like, you know, you have nowhere above you to go. What you want is, what makes good rhythm playing work is the dynamics of it, where sometimes it's you're pushing hard and sometimes you're playing a little lighter, you know. And it's all hand control. It's, you know, you're muting some with your left hand, but mostly it's, you know, you're just hitting it a little harder or you're gripping the pick a little tighter, which will make it ring a little harder. So if you listen to, it's almost like forget the chords and just sort of clap out the rhythm. You know, where are the beats in there? Because they're not always going to be on the 4. They're not always going to be, what's like a 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to be. So you listen to where the beats are and accent those. So the trick, I guess, is as you're playing at volume, how do you, it's almost like you can either add the accent to it or you can subtract the part that's not the accent by playing lighter. So playing accents doesn't necessarily always mean playing harder. You know, sometimes it's playing less. Sometimes it's, you know, like, what's that win? Like when we did, you move it back down, you know, that last bit, bop, 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 bop. And you hit that C chord with that rest before that, you know, and it's only one beat, you know, it's 1 and 2 and 1 and, you know, that accent is what makes that next chord sound so powerful, even if you don't play it any louder, even if you don't play it any harder, there's just, it's highlighted by the space that's around it. So sometimes what makes, that's why, you know, playing parts and bits like I was talking about before, if you're doing that kind of, you know, why that jumps out so well is because there's nothing around it. And if somebody else is strumming away like this, you got that kind of bouncing beat going back and forth, and finding those little spaces that you can put those accents in really enriches the playing. It really enriches to me, the fun of playing with somebody, because I find two people playing far more interesting than one person playing, you know, and even someone like Mark O'Connor, the fiddle player, who's like a once in a generation fiddle player, played a show in Lexington one time and he's playing solo. He's just playing fiddle on by himself. And he's playing these long, rambling things that are dazzling. They're positively dazzling. But after a while, it's like this flurry of notes flying by, but there's no harmonic content because he's not playing those notes in relationship to anything else. And the harmony, the contrast between the melodies or the beats or the tempos or whatever, that to me is what's really interesting. It's the harmonic content that I find so fascinating. That's why things like, you know, when you're playing Isn't It a Pity, you know, and you have that you know, G note down there at the bottom, it's gonna, you know, that kind of thing, pushing against it. When you go to that note's not right because they're not really playing through the chords up at that point. They're just playing that lick. It's later on that they go to the where it gets to the chord and plays you all the way through. And by that point, the bass player is actually playing along with the chords. So there's actually sections in the songs where it evolves that way too. Does that make sense? Is this making any sense out there? Yeah, Bill?
I have a question about Isn't It a Pity?
Okay.
When we listened to it, it seemed like the third line of each verse was the chords were different. Maybe that's what you were just talking about.
Well, well, the melody changes. If you listen to the structure of it, it's really kind of an AABA structure. You know, isn't it a pity? Isn't it a shame? Da 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 da.
Yeah, and then it goes to like a 2 major chord.
It goes to the 2
and then
major
to a
chord.
4 major chord.
Actually, it goes to a 2/7. So it goes to an E7.
Okay.
Because he wants to keep. No. You know. It's an A7, it's a 2/7.
Yeah.
And then the 4 chord with the G on top of it. It's like a. What it really is it's a C chord over G. So it'd be more like if I had 6 fingers, I could do this. And so you still have that on the 4th. That G is sort of still pedaling through that as he's going through that. And it's what's confusing, I guess, about the song a little bit as you listen to it. The first time he goes through that, they don't really hit that chord very hard because he's still doing that G pedal through it. The second time they do, they hit it harder, and it's in that Phil Spector wall of sound kind of thing. As it's building through 3 or 4 or 5 choruses of it, it just gets bigger and lusher and bigger and lusher, and you know, and some of that initial playing on there.
This unforgettable vacation.
We don't care about that.
Dad booked his family summer vacation early.
Okay, listen to the beginning.
How we take each other's love.
Listen, it's mostly piano under that, not guitar. That's piano.
How we break each other's heart.
And strings as well.
Cause each other pain. How we take each each other's love.
And that's where the bass now sort of picks up. That's where the tambourine comes in, right? When it goes to that 4 chord.
Forgetting to give back. Isn't it a pity?
And there's Ringo.
Some things take too long.
Yeah. And you can hear the strings now doing that walk down.
Not to let it be. Still all the same. And because of loyalty,
Yeah, that's almost like a C6. It just gets bigger and lusher and fatter. And knowing Phil Spector, you guys know Phil Spector, Grace, Court, Ryan? Do you know who Phil Spector was?
He just
Yeah.
died.
He just died, yeah.
Sad, yeah.
Yeah, Phil Spector, comma, producer, comma, murderer,
Right.
because he was in prison.
Mhm.
But yeah, he was sort of noted for inventing what they called the wall of sound, which means when they recorded that record, it's very likely that the only thing on that recording that was overdubbed was the slide guitar solo. Everything else was done probably live in the studio. All 4 keyboard players, all 4 guitar players, bass player, Ringo, somebody playing percussion, the male chorus in the back. They were probably all in that studio together. Because if you listen to some other tracks from that record, there's so much reverb and all the stuff sort of mashing together that is the sound. It's not the sound of distinct instruments that you can pick out the way people record now. It's the mashing of all that stuff together that just gives us this lush kind of blanket of sound, which was really a big signature thing. It's in its way, it's a little dated. It's almost like you wish you could hear it without all the reverb on it and actually hear it kind of clean. But if they record everybody in the same room at the same time, you can't. That's kind of the nature of it. Yeah, he was brilliant and crazy as a loon. Supposedly he was, he worked with, I guess, all the Beatles except for Paul. I guess Paul didn't do anything with him after, but he produced this for George. He produced the first couple of Lennon solo albums. He produced one of Ringo's solo albums. They were all big fans of his because he was like the guy. He's the one that did all the, River Deep, Mountain Wide, Mountain High, and all the other big gigantic 60. He did the Righteous Brother. What's the big Righteous Brothers song?
You've lost that love and feeling.
Lost That Love and Feeling. I mean, that's Phil Spector. I mean, it's just signature stuff.
What made him so good? Like, why was he so big?
because no one really ever figured out. He had good enough ears, and he was a decent musician, but not a good enough musician. But he was a decent musician that he knew that he wanted to get that sort of impact of all those sounds, and he was able to get like 3 piano players in the room playing together, and not even really mic them up separately, because he was recording most of that stuff on 4 tracks. When he did like the Righteous Brothers and all those original stuff, that's like 4 tracks. So it's mostly the sound of the room, and he just have people, he'd get the microphones, 2 or 3 microphones or 4 microphones set up, and then he would move people around until the mix was what he wanted to hear on the headphones, and then he would record it, and he recorded it in a way that you had 3 or 4 guitar players or 3 or 4 piano players playing, but the tone would be a little bit different, or they'd be playing the same thing, but it would sound a little different because they're in different spots, or because this one is further back than this one, there'd be a little bit of a delay, so it adds some lushness that way, or one would play down here, one would play up here. So he basically built these little rock and roll orchestras, and he recorded these songs where you really can hear all the parts, but not with the clarity that you hear stuff today. He just had a very, very good ear in terms of putting that all together. Sort of amazing. And he was sort of the role model for Brian Wilson, who did exactly the same thing, which is the way Brian Wilson played. All of his he was I was just saying, right? He was sort of the inspiration for Brian Wilson doing things like all of the Pet Sounds kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. That stuff, it's the same kind of thing where you'd have people, all these players in the studio in LA, the Wrecking Crew, with 2 drummers and 3 guitar players and 2 bass players and 4 piano players, and everybody playing it all together on 3 or 4 tracks, but mixed so that if you walked into the room, you wouldn't get any of that. But when you hear it through the headphones, because of where the microphones were placed, that was the sound. And that's what he was looking for. And he was just patient enough and demanding enough and crazy enough to sort of not be finished until he got the sound that he wanted. And once he did, it's like, okay, record it. And they did it like in 1 or 2 takes and it was done. Boom. No overdubs, no nothing. Because this is really primitive times. I mean, a lot of that stuff was recorded back in the mid 60s. The studios are recording to tape. They have really not much capacity to punch in parts in it. They can't really edit, except if if you're going to edit, it means you're taking a razor blade to the tape and taping and splicing the tapes together. So it's really complicated, detailed stuff. The fact that they can do that kind of stuff, the fact that he did that, like Sgt. Pepper's was recorded on 4 tracks, and you listen to it and think, how is that even possible? But it's somewhere. Do I have it here? Give me 2 seconds. I actually have the 4-track mix of that. Where do I have it? And when you listen to the 4 tracks, you can hear where things were like dropped in. They would leave stuff out of the way. Yeah, here we go. This is cool. This will be worth it. Yeah, then we can finish. They took all the instruments and they would like get 3 tracks, and then they would mix those 3 tracks down to a 4th track on a separate machine, and then save that, and then erase the other 3 and go back and re-record it with that kind of stuff. So we're doing that sort of stuff. So if you listen, let me pull up. I should share this while I'm doing this. It's kind of fun. Let me share this.
Can you also email it to us after? Because I'm guessing we're probably not going to hear it quite as as
Actually-
clearly just through this as we might otherwise.
No, actually, if it's coming through the studio software, you probably will.
Okay.
That's what I'm hoping. So what I've got is 4 tracks of this that I'm loading in. You can see the software, they see the mix thing that I'm showing. So there's the 4 tracks, okay? And if I play, oh, can we hear that? Come on. There we go. I don't know what's on what. So there's where it's going to start. There's the vocals. And here's the one. Where's something? So on the guitar track, in that little spot, they put in the horns and they said, so right there, they stop the guitar and know they have to leave space for the horns, and they stop the guitar and then drop in the horns ba, 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 on the same track. So this is all mixed out this way. But if you listen to some of them, I mean, they sound like really hissy. And you can hear echoes from the previous recording of that. So it takes, well, it takes, first of all, an insane amount of planning to be able to do that, to be able to record it and leave enough room for what everything's going to go in for 4 tracks, which Spectre did. It also takes a lot of planning to figure out how you're going to record that in a way that you're putting things on the same tape and getting the levels to where they are all going to be where they're supposed to be, and get enough, you know, whatever effects you're using, which was not very much. It's basically a compressor and a little delay. To do all that, you know, no screens, no, all you had is a tape machine in front of you, and you're doing that basically by instinct and a counter that tells you how many seconds have gone by. So was way more complicated to do that, and way more chancy to do that. I could never do the stuff I'm doing when I was doing that back then, because it was primitive. I mean, it was Model T level stuff, and yet the sounds that came out of it are spectacular. One of the reasons that the Beatles stuff sounds so good is because the engineering staff at Abbey Road Studio would literally come in and they'd calibrate every recorder every evening. So the things sound absolutely pristine. And if you listen to the recordings against, say, Herman's Hermits or some of the other bands from that period, they just don't sound as good. You know, the attention to detail on the Abbey Road stuff, because they would record orchestras and things like that. The quality of the recordings are just really, really, really good. And that's part of what makes them sound so good. But it's sort of fascinating. That's yeah, but Phil Spector, he's like, let's just shovel more stuff in, because all they could do is, we got 4 tracks. Okay, bring me the 4 pianos and the 7 guitar players and the singers and, you know, the drummer and the guy playing tambourine and the guy playing castanets and the guy playing sleigh bells, and it's all in there at the same time. And it's, I imagine, a roar as you're playing it. But once you listen to it afterwards, like, oh my God, that's magic, you know? That was the genius. And that's, you know, same thing with Brian Wilson. If you listen to the Brian Wilson, some of his like the outtake stuff where they're doing the mixing and he's like coaching people through the parts. He's literally telling people, no, play these notes right here. And they're going, that doesn't sound right. It's like, no, play these. And you listen to it and the recording goes, that's not intuitive. That's not right. And it's perfect. You know, they're geniuses. They just knew. And the good thing, like Brian Wilson never murdered anybody. So there's that. He's got that going for him. So that's good. So we're about at time. This is about the time your dad would probably say, say, hey, okay, I gotta go make dinner. So fun, good choice, good song. That was a really good choice. Grace, I'll figure out how to do It's So Real. We can talk about that. And maybe we can look at one of those, the Who songs, and we can talk about strumming patterns and a bit of that. And anything else you guys want to talk about, if you want to do something on electric guitar sometime, great. You want to talk about, tunings, we can talk about that. We can talk about pretty much anything, whatever you guys feel like, okay? Good to see you all.
That sounds great.
Good.
Good to see you too.
Glad you come.
Thanks so
Give
much,
it up.
Jimmy.
See you guys
everyone.
soon. Take care.
Thanks, Jim.
Bye-bye.
Bye, fam.
Okay, Court, you gonna call later on? We'll talk about vacation stuff?
Mhm.
Okay,
Yep, I'll give you a call right now.
okay, I'm gonna go upstairs.
Okay.
Okay, bye.